My name is Wijangco. I'm from Technology Services Group. I'm going to be presenting integrating Alfresco with Salesforce. We're a partner that actually helped Alfresco develop the integration that's going to be released at the end of the year. So just a quick agenda. Hold on a sec. All right. Little quick thing about Technology Services Group. Why do a Salesforce Alfresco integration? Kind of talk about some of the reasons why or benefits of that. Some high-level use cases and examples of how the integration could be helpful from a business case perspective. Technical architecture, how we actually did it. Some of the things you have to consider when developing with both Salesforce and Alfresco. And then I'll do a quick demonstration. We actually have a demo instance of it that we used for Dreamforce a couple months back, so we'll be going over that same demo, and it's live, and obviously then a Q&A and any questions you might have about the integration. All right. Just quick things about us. We're based out of Chicago, founded in 1996. We have a satellite office in Kansas City. We basically specialize in implementation of ECM and CRM solutions. Obviously then we're an Alfresco and a Salesforce.com partner. Diverse industries, financial services, manufacturing, pharmaceutical, food and beverage. We've been a partner since 2006, so we're one of the first half dozen or so partners to partner up with Alfresco. We also won 2012 Implementation of the Year with our work for the New York Philharmonic. You might have seen that on the Alfresco website. It's a digital archive where the New York Philharmonic is archiving all their photos and physical content available online. So, aside from our Salesforce work and Implementation of the Year, these are just some of our solutions that we've developed on top of the Alfresco repository. Migration, HPI, the high performance interface for control docs. We'll actually be talking about tomorrow in another session. Same with Active Wizard. Open Annotate, it's a capability to annotate on top of images, on top of content within Alfresco. So obviously, this isn't the focus of the presentation, but if you have any questions, feel free to talk to me afterwards, or come to the session tomorrow, I believe at 11:50. So, all right, so why integrate Alfresco and Salesforce? Obviously, there's a variety of different reasons, benefits to doing that. One thing is obviously cloud or on-premise. You've probably heard this a couple of times already, but there's obviously other vendors there that do this integration, but I think Alfresco is perfectly positioned from a cloud or on-premise position. So vendors that you can put the content within Alfresco Cloud, you have needs to put that on-premise. You can do that with the hybrid sync capability that then opens up a whole lot of other options in terms of being able to route it for approval, extended document management functionality. Compliance security concerns. So with that hybrid piece, a lot of things that you'll run into with some organizations is that they don't want their content in the cloud long term, right? I have contracts, I have proposals, I have sensitive information that I am required to store behind a firewall on premise. We've talked to some customers where they're actually downloading it manually from Salesforce and manually importing it into the repository for legal or compliance reasons. So another great reason why I love everything in the cloud. I want everything in the cloud, but there's just certain pieces of content from a compliance perspective I have to keep behind the firewall. Content limitations. So when we talk about it from a Salesforce perspective, actually depending upon the edition that you're using, you do have limitations on top of Salesforce in terms of how much content you can store in the repository. You can obviously pay more for more storage, but it's more costly. And at the end of the day, Salesforce.com isn't built to be an ECM or content repository platform, right? It's meant to be a CRM or a chatter or social machine, right? It's not meant to be a content repository where you're storing all of your content long term. So just here, basically, most of the editions you would get 11 gig at a minimum. You could pay for more, but really then it turns out to they put restriction on a per user basis, so you're only allowed to store 612 megabytes of content per user. So use cases where maybe I'm uploading images or photos or something of more sustenance than your typical PDFs and Word docs, that may become an issue, especially if you're wanting to use Salesforce as that primary interface. Extended document management. Obviously, this is pretty simple. Alfresco is a platform. It provides document management capabilities. So maybe I want to expand on workflow capabilities. Maybe I want to have versioning. Maybe I want annotations. Maybe I want to do all these things that ECM repositories are very good at. Now you can expose that functionality from the Alfresco side while still leveraging the Salesforce interface. And this goes back to the whole platform connected context scenario, right? So really, at the end of the day, just given the integration capabilities that Alfresco provides, Salesforce.com is basically just another platform that you can integrate with by using REST APIs or CMS or what Alfresco provides, right? From a developer perspective, integrating with Salesforce isn't that different than integrating with Liferay or with Jive or with Drupal. I'm making REST-based calls into that repository. I can expose the content pretty easily. And I think that just further accentuates the integratability of the platform. So whether it's on the cloud or on an on-premise repository. So from our perspective, it's just another channel, except it's cloud-based versus something that you may be hosting internally. The other piece, I think, when we talk about Salesforce itself is there are different ways that you can store content in Salesforce, right? So how many people are actually Salesforce users, just out of curiosity? OK. So the integration that we initially developed, obviously, it's tied to opportunities in your traditional Salesforce objects, right? So I have an opportunity. Maybe I have some notes or attachments that I want to do that. That's basically what the integration's initially been set out to do, is to replace that and allow you to store content. There's obviously other ways or other silos of content within Salesforce that also have content, right? You have Chatter, Chatterbox, which will be coming out soon. You have libraries and knowledge base and the documents tabs. All of these are different silos of information within Salesforce. And what's interesting about it is that they are silos. You can't share that content in the opportunities. I can't take something in the knowledge base and share that in the library. They're all very siloed. So there's not necessarily a way that you can say, here's a marketing document. I want to expose that across the board in all the silos repositories within Salesforce. So, and by leveraging repositories like Alfresco, that basically gives you that way to remove that silo, right? Underlying repository, exposing the content in all those silos, but then by leveraging things like the hybrid sync, putting it down to your on-premise repository, or maybe it stays in the cloud, now I have a way to propagate all of that content to other people in the enterprise that aren't just using Salesforce. It could be legal. It could be consumers on the front end. Maybe I'm going to take that contract or something, route it through approval, and maybe I want to expose it to my consumer that wants to use it on a different portal that you've developed. Or maybe it's for R&D, and now they can get that material and look at it, right? So it's a very easy way to propagate that content to other users, remove those silos, make it easily distributable, and expose it in other areas aside from your Salesforce. And it's another way to save licensing as well, right? I don't want to pay for my Salesforce licenses for legal, where all they're really doing is just reading the document. Why not put it in a central repository where they can get to it at a much easier way? All right, so just some really high-level use cases just on people we've talked to, conversations we've had about the integration. Obviously, one of the most straightforward one is contract approvals, right? That's probably the most typical one that you would see. They don't want that contract to be on the cloud long term. I want to go and put it into Salesforce. It goes into Alfresco, gets routed for approval, whether it's through legal or some other entities within the enterprise without having to go through Alfresco or through Salesforce. Once it's approved, versions already updated within the Alfresco repository. I come into Salesforce, you're always getting the latest version, and you know that it's approved. Then by leveraging Alfresco, things like electronic signature, history, audit history of what's been done to that document, internal approvals, all of that is what the repository provides and within the enterprise. Other more interesting use cases are really marketing. I talked to one client where they're out on the field. Their sales reps are on the field, so they see things that that might be beneficial for marketing, right? So they build fire hydrants. So they take a picture of the fire hydrant. Hey, marketing, here's a picture of something in this city. They take that picture. It goes into Salesforce. That's a tool they're used to using. It goes into there, goes directly into an Alfresco site, and that's what marketing uses, that material or collateral, to then build marketing materials for their brochures or whatever, for examples. Competitive intelligence, same thing. We've talked to Salesforce customers that may be out in the field and they see material that a competitor is building. Maybe it's some type of product that they're not offering, but a competitor is, their client is using it. They take a picture of it, put it into Salesforce. They can now redirect that straight to product management or to R&D to get that material to them a lot quicker. You know, so it's that central place, eliminating emails. Where can I get all that content and where can I share it? The other big piece is maybe you also want that to go both ways, right? Maybe then you also want marketing folks to expose that content within Salesforce right away. Easy way to get it out to a large number of users versus mass emailing them. So, all right. Any questions, I guess, around the whys and the use cases before I get into some of the technical architecture pieces? Okay. So I think, so this is getting on the more technical side and just how it's built and some of the things you have to consider when developing upon the Salesforce.com platform. The big thing is around governor limits. So with most cloud or platforms, there's going to be some governance put in place in terms of what you can and can't do with the repository. It's not like something where your hosting can basically bang on it, add more servers, right? This is a platform that everyone's sharing. So things that we had to take into account when developing the integration, number of requests you could make within one call. So like we couldn't repeatedly call Alfresco like 100 times in one request. Salesforce.com basically wouldn't allow that. Timeouts, how long you'd take to get the results back. Maximum size, so like if I'm uploading content, actually, we had to work around ways around that because Salesforce.com wouldn't allow you to basically upload a 100 meg file from Salesforce.com into the Alfresco repository. So these are all things to consider, I guess, when basically developing on cloud platforms. And we've been working with, obviously, Alfresco engineers to basically figure out the best ways to do those things. But when you think about it, it makes sense from a Salesforce.com perspective as well, right? They need to put, for the people that are developing on top of that platform, there has to be some type of governance limits to basically maintain performance. Cloud API. Actually, I stole this straight from Peter's deck, and I didn't tell him. So, but with this integration, we're one of the first integrators to actually leverage the production Cloud API to build this integration. So leveraging both CMIS and REST to build everything was fairly straightforward. We had to leverage OAuth for authentication. So the exchange between Alfresco and Salesforce when authenticating, we leveraged the OAuth 2 authentication. And I think one thing to note is that this is, with this API available, this isn't the only thing that you can do, right? Basically, anyone that knows Apex or developing on the Force.com platform, if I'm building a portal, case management site, basically anything within the Salesforce domain, I can leverage the Alfresco Cloud API to enable content on those platforms. So that's a huge, I guess, case from a cloud development perspective. Content models and associations. So at least within the cloud, basically, when this is released, we'll have specific content types that are supported. So within Salesforce, accounts, opportunities, contracts, cases, you'll be able to add content to those type of Salesforce objects. That includes some of the metadata as well, and that's what the supporting aspects are. So basically, when I import the content, anything around that opportunity is attached to the document when I import it into Alfresco. Likewise, then, when I want to search for that content in Alfresco through advanced search, I can now search on that same metadata that was exposed in Salesforce. I can now also search for that same metadata in Alfresco based on those attributes. record relationships. So another piece here is really then how do we associate all the content to a record in Salesforce? We're doing that basically with a contentless object. But what this means, and we don't want to get too technical, but basically what it means is that no matter where I put it in the Alfresco repository, whether I put it in another folder or just a completely different site, when you go into Salesforce, there's always going to be a relationship between the actual record in Salesforce and the content. So it will always bring up all of the content associated to that record, no matter where it is in the repository. There were some other technical reasons as to why we needed to do this association and architect it that way. But obviously, that benefit is a nice piece of it, right? It doesn't, and a lot of the other competitors that do this are tied by a folder. This integration from Alfresco's perspective is not. All right, any questions before I just get into the demo? Okay. All right, so this is a developer. So this is a developer instance of Salesforce hitting an Alfresco repository. So here I'm just going to look at Dunder Mifflin Turbine, and you'll see the Alfresco component here. I guess maybe even before I get into this, so this is going to be a free App Exchange component that'll be released by end of year. So Alfresco or Salesforce administrators will be able to go to the App Exchange, download it, and configure it to your Salesforce and attach it to your Alfresco Cloud instance. And then obviously, if you want to do the hybrid syncing to an on-premise, you'd be able to do that as well, assuming you have a on-premise license as well. So, but this is the Alfresco component. Obviously, everything in here is actually stored within the Alfresco repository. I can paginate through the list of documents, but I'll go ahead and attach a file. And so what's also been defined here is a document type. So this is the type of document that it is. This is just basically metadata. A Salesforce administrator on their admin page would be able to choose what this list is. So there'd be actually direct control on what you'd want to add or remove from this document type list. But I'll just assume this is agreement and save it. Ooh, whoops. I did not delete that before I. And so this isn't actually uploading into Salesforce. It's saved it directly into Alfresco. If I go to the next page, there's the document. Obviously, the metadata about it, it's stored. It's coming from Alfresco. If I want to view that document, it actually links back to the Alfresco instance that it's been uploaded in. And you can obviously see the document. You also notice that by default, within Alfresco, we actually create a folder for each of the opportunities and store all that content within the opportunity. Although, like I said before, it does not mean that if I move the document, you can no longer see it. So I'll actually go into here, move the document to this DevCon folder. And then I will still go back here, refresh this page, and you'll still see that it'll still show up regardless of where it's been moved in the repository. So you can also edit the document. Editing it here, I can basically upload new versions. This would automatically version the documents via Salesforce. I can choose to download the document. I can also choose to download or see more options, and this would basically bring you back to the Alfresco screen here as well to do any of the document management features that you'd want to do. Also, a nice thing with all the content is that it's also integrated with Chatter. So you'll see here from a social perspective, any of the content as I upload it, delete it, or remove it from this opportunity. Chatter also updates as well, so that people within the Salesforce side that leverage Chatter exclusively can see the update to the content and get to it easily. Clicking on these links would bring it automatically as well to the Alfresco share interface. So, all right. That's basically, in general, what the initial integration will do. Any other questions about the demo? Yep.
I'm not sure the relationship between the thing you're creating that component to Salesforce component in Alfresco. Is that a folder?
Yeah, so basically when this is going to be a really mocked up version of it, but I'll show it. So if I go into this node here, this isn't the final one, but a Salesforce admin here would basically be able to choose what site they'd want to store all the content in. And so that would basically be a dedicated Salesforce site. And then by default then, all of the records that you store within Salesforce, are coming from Salesforce, would go into a folder structure there, right? So if I'm in that opportunity and I upload a document, we'd automatically create that folder based on the opportunity name. And then the content would go in that folder.
And if I move that document to that folder representing a different opportunity for that same Salesforce.
It's always, because you uploaded it from that opportunity.
Yeah, but it doesn't reflect that in
No, it's being tied from a metadata perspective. No, in future versions, one of the big things is the both ways, right? If I'm in marketing and I upload something into Alfresco, how can I make sure relate that to an opportunity that exists in Salesforce? That's most likely something that's going to be coming up almost immediately after this. Right. You know, so that's definitely something that would most likely be addressed sooner rather than later. And there's different ways to do that. Like there's different approaches to doing that. If I was on an on-premise system versus the cloud, there's obviously a little bit more restrictions from an Alfresco Cloud. We just have to work through those, what that approach would be. So, yep. Security from which perspective? Okay. Right. So there's two ways to address that there. From a Salesforce perspective, obviously, if you don't belong to that opportunity, you're not going to see the content, right? So really, on the Salesforce perspective, it's whatever security you have when you log in. If you don't have access to the opportunity, you can't see the content at all. From the Alfresco perspective, we are not mirroring the security in Salesforce. So that would be up to you from an Alfresco perspective to set the permissions as you see fit. So if there's a specific folder that you did not want other people to have access to, you could change the permissions from an Alfresco perspective, and that would still work. Yep. Correct. Oh, on this, yes. So it's assumed that each if you're a Salesforce customer, you would have set up your own Alfresco Cloud account for your domain. And the Salesforce admin, when they log in, this is like a mock-up of the admin page, but you'd basically be designating here what your domain is on the Alfresco Cloud. And when you log in, that's what it would be associated to. So that'd be up to the Salesforce admin to configure that initially, but that should be pretty seamless to your business users once that's been configured. Correct. So basically, it'd be tied to a specific site in your Alfresco Cloud. Well, each tenant is essentially a company, right? So like I am tsgrp.com. So we have a Yes, yes, exactly. Yeah, in Alfresco Cloud, you probably have a number of sites from a collaboration perspective, right? So as of right now, it would only be tied to one site. But then that's where you could leverage workflows or other things if you wanted to propagate that to other sites after it's in that initial targeted Salesforce site, right? I'm trying to understand. So you're looking to, correct. It's only applied on the Salesforce side. If you're on the Alfresco side, the people that would be able to see that documents are whoever is given access to that site. Right, right. We're not, as right now, we're not synchronizing that security. Is that a big deal from your perspective, or even from your perspective, in terms of the security piece? So you'd want it to be synced from Salesforce to Alfresco? Right. Because you're still limiting it, right? It's whoever you invite to that site is really who would have access to it. So, yep. If I move it, as long as the user that's coming in from Salesforce has the permissions to see it, they're going to see it, right? Right. That is a potential, right? So you'd have to, whoever's managing permissions on the Alfresco Cloud side would have to make sure that that's set up correctly, right? From a workflow movement perspective. Okay. Okay. Any other questions?
But how would we even see it? Because you are actually an Alfresco user and you do a lot of management, and you're actually building that list. You're getting that list as the Alfresco user. You're deleging
Yes.
access to the body of Alfresco.
Correct.
So you've never seen anything you couldn't get
Right.
from that list.
Whatever the security you have on the Alfresco side, that's going to drive what you see here.
It's not an impersonation, you're actually talking to it.
That's what the OAuth piece does, right? There's a handshake to do that. You could, but
Control who can see what. So if Ray's putting something into the Salesforce side, and I don't have permission to see it in Salesforce, but yet what you're saying is I could potentially go into Alfresco and see it. But you can set up and rules, permissions, and roles, all that on the Alfresco side. So there's probably some potential. How are you doing authentication from the Salesforce side? Are you going to LDAP or Active Directory, and essentially using that same model, replicating on the Alfresco side so that they're aligned? Does that make sense?
Except that it's the cloud, that's not functioning, so it's doing authentication with Alfresco.
right.
You're doing back in the console and
Right. That opens a whole nother door too, right? If you're limiting, if you're using this from a hybrid perspective and then you're replicating it down to an on-premise thing, that's a whole nother permissions discussion of who you want to have access, et cetera. So, right, in a typical use case, maybe even from the cloud side, maybe you're exposing, if it's sensitive content, maybe it's just a limited set to begin with from a partner side or external vendors. And then you're more stringent on the permissions once it gets onto the on-premise. Yeah. Like if, well, Yeah, it could work either way. So like one might be if you have to have legal actually approve the contact, or maybe they're reviewing it or editing it. It could go, the initial version could be imported via Salesforce. Then it routes to legal, where they do edits to it. Then it routes back, and then someone from Salesforce then could see, or there could be some notification where then they would be able to see that latest version, get the updates, give it back to the customer. That is one scenario. But you're right, I have seen other scenarios where, well, that's probably because their processes are so separated out right now, where they just don't want all their contracts in Salesforce long term after they've been executed. Oh, like when the, yeah, that's especially true. Yes. Any other questions? Mike? Yeah, you know, you asked the one question. No, it was at one point, and certain environments were lost. But basically, engineering came up with a model for let's see. Engineering came up with a model for these 4 main objects. They were meant to be somewhat generic too, because in the future, you know, like if maybe there's integration with Sugar or some other CRM platforms from a cloud perspective that you could generically use them. I could probably dig them up if you really want to see them. But it's most of the attributes that you would see back in Salesforce. So when I go into here, I'd say it's probably 20% of those, the main ones, the important ones that you'd want to search from a vendor perspective or opportunity perspective. I mean, it's curious how important that is to people here from a metadata perspective. Is that something that may be valuable for you, Mike? Okay. Like from high school or something like that, or right. Right. So like in your scenario, I bet that you might make some type of custom Salesforce object, because obviously I don't think some of that metadata would be captured in an out-of-the-box instance of Salesforce. So then it'd probably be more of a customization where then you could map that same metadata back to a content model that you would create maybe on on-premise version of Alfresco, right? And then map it like that. So same concept, just a little bit from a services perspective. So, anything else? All right. Well, I think we're ending a little bit early, but thank you. Let me know if you have any questions.